Okay, well, let's just bow our heads. I'll just start off with a quick prayer. All right, dear Lord, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity that I can come and speak to the people here tonight. If I can just help one person tonight, then it'll be worth the trip for me. I'd like to pray for everyone in this room and for everyone on the outside who's still struggling with addiction. I'm sure from experience we all know how horrible that can be. And I'd just like to pray that this message falls on fertile soil and that you can take something out of it. All right, guys, my name is Chris. I was here from June the 19th last year to January the 2nd. I'm just going to start off with a bit of a backstory. I won't do that too long, but when I was driving here, I remembered in December, I think it was in December, there was a guy who came and gave a testimony. I don't think he was all that great, but it was very intimidating to me. He was an army guy, he was in the US military, and he was fought in Iraq and stuff. I don't know if he did, but in my mind he had medals of honor and he was like saved hundreds of people. And so I'm just an average guy. I haven't achieved the success that he's achieved, but at least I'm still sober, so that's the main thing. I should be a year and 6 months sober, but I'll tell you about a little mishap that I had along the way. Okay, so my addiction, I basically started like most people, started in high school, started smoking weed, started drinking, started bunking out of school and made bad friends that were all bad influences on each other. And then the usual thing, sexually molested, kind of bad things happened in my life. At that stage, it didn't seem like anything big. I kind of shrugged it off. My counselor, Rolf, kind of made me see that how those things affected my life going into the future. But so when I got to Stellenbosch, I was drinking a lot, I was smoking a lot. Some more bad things happened to me. My roommate died. I was sexually assaulted again in university. And when it got really bad was when my ex-girlfriend, we were together for about 4 years, she broke up with me. And at the same time, I tried to stop weed. So together, those two things created this anxiety inside me that I couldn't get rid of. I tried for 2 months to stay clean, and then eventually I smoked weed again, and my anxiety just melted away. It was like a miracle cure for me. So that's kind of really when my addiction really kicked in, and I started using it as a crutch. Ended up going to rehab. My first rehab was a 6-week rehab in Johannesburg. Everything went well. I gave it my all there, and I really thought that I'd fixed myself and healed. And made the common mistake that I think a lot of people that are back here maybe also made, is thinking that you can have one beer. I had this conversation with a lot of young guys, especially when I was here at Jericho. They all said to me, but like they were addicted to crystal meth, so like I can drink again. You know, that was their reasoning. And I'd learned from that mistake. One beer inevitably turns into 2 or 3 beers, which turns into crystal meth, I guess, in my case. Which I hadn't done before. It was just so I was living in Australia at the time, and for my birthday I decided to have 1 beer, and then it wasn't long. Ended up in the party scene and started taking a lot of drugs. After that I came back to South Africa. Actually, well, I should probably tell the other side of the story. I met a girl in Australia. I ended up getting married there. And very toxic relationship. We were taking drugs on the weekend. We're at each other's throat in the weekdays. Eventually it started getting quite physical, and horrible divorce and a horrible breakup. I ended up getting kicked out of Australia, had to come back to South Africa, which was the first time then when I actually looked online and saw Jericho. So in my mind then I already knew that I needed help, but again, being stubborn, I figured I could try and fix it myself. So another couple of years went by. The other drugs stopped, but I kept drinking a lot and kept smoking a lot of weed, until eventually I realized that I have to check myself into rehab. So I got hold of Charles at the time and organized to come in. And that's when I landed up at Jericho in June. Being at Jericho was an interesting experience. When I got here, I was very open-minded because I checked myself in, I was very open-minded to do anything. I was willing to scrub the floors. I really found that hard work and focusing on details, especially like cleaning the corners of the floors and making sure every plate's clean, like not cutting corners as I had been my whole life. I made sure when I got here that I was going to really focus on trying to do the small things right Because I realized if you can't do the small things right, the big things are inevitably not going to work out. So I was very open-minded. I was an atheist at the time, but I had decided that I'm going to give it everything. I was quite shocked the first time I came to. The very first night I got here was on a Wednesday, and it was worship. That was a big shock to my system. But I gave it everything. I read my Bible. I read religious books. I prayed as much as I could. I was mostly praying for God to show me that He exists. That's kind of what I was doing, because I was still an atheist. I used to argue with Rolf about, science versus religion versus logic and reason and all this nonsense. But at the same time, I was praying to try and understand. And my breakthrough kind of came at a funny time. I went on my weekend and got back a little bit cocky, thinking that I'd mastered the program, and I've just been on my weekend. Everything was going well. Brought back some music, some house music that ended up getting banned, and I made a couple of comments about that. And I think the next day I was put on isolation, which was quite a shock because I was doing quite well. I thought I was fit and everything, but. So isolation was probably the best thing that ever happened to me at Jericho. It just really gave me time to think. I used to sit there facing the wall, and I used to just meditate. Every bite of food I took, I would try and taste the different flavors and maybe put a bit more salt. I'd eat with my eyes closed. It was quite a nice. It was actually nice because sometimes I didn't really feel like talking to people, and when you go sit there by the smoking area or waiting for lunch, guys want to talk to you, and then you feel that you have to make conversation. But isolation, you can just relax. Very nice. So I kept praying and praying and praying, and I was sitting here and meditating and trying to pray for. I didn't really know what I was praying, who I was praying to at the time, but I was just trying to get some sort of sign. So after one lunch, I walked down to the bottom. I was at the bottom house quite early, and the sun was shining. So I figured I didn't want to look at anyone, so I just stood and looked at the sun. And this big cross appeared in the sun. I was like, no, I didn't want to see it, because I knew this was a message, and I did still stubborn. But that kind of sealed the deal for me. That was my sign I was looking for. And then at least I knew who I was praying to then. So I could actually make the connections, and I could feel like I'm building a personal relationship with God, which is a start for me. Yeah, so a couple of things about Jericho that I realized once I was here. Firstly, if you give it your everything, then it can work out. But from being on the outside now for quite a while, the outside's not an easy place to be. In here, sometimes you're scared of it. Other times you think, you can handle it because you're confident in here. But it'll find ways to attack you in the most weird situations, like with family members and another thing to look out for is relationships with girls. That's a dangerous one, because next thing they don't like you anymore, and then you're looking for something to grab onto. So it is a good idea once you get out here, just give it some time and don't try and run into it. But to build a foundation at Jericho is really what it's about. It's about being open to everything and just submitting to the process, because what you do in here is going to determine how you are on the outside. If you're in here and you don't want to submit and you think you know better and you can just cut corners here, and you don't really do the dishes properly, and you try and take extra smoke breaks, and that stuff will come back to bite you. So it really is about building a foundation here, and listening to what these guys have to say, listening to what a counselor has to say, and listening in the lessons, in the classes, and in the groups. Those things really mean a lot, because they come from people who have been through the same thing, and you can learn a lot from them. And in order to do that, you need humility. Arrogance doesn't work. You have to take a step back, submit to them, and submit to the process, and then that'll set up a nice foundation for when you leave. So when I left in January the 2nd. There were two things on my agenda. I didn't really write a thorough plan when I left. I just knew there were two things that I had to do, and one was fitness, and the other one was going to church. So I immediately did those two things. The day I got back, the next day I joined a CrossFit gym. CrossFit's nice because it's not an isolation kind of thing. You don't go to a Virgin Active and do your own thing with your headphones in and then you leave. CrossFit's quite nice because everyone invites you in and you build a nice community around yourself. And it's a community that is focused on the same things, like health and bettering themselves and getting fit and not taking drugs and sleeping the weekend away kind of thing. So I went to church, I went to CrossFit, and those were the two pillars that I was going to hold on to at the time. But then the shock hit me. The very first night I got out, my family was all excited, and they invited some friends and family, and they all came to our house there in Kimberley. And inevitably the beers were flowing, the brandy was there, like it was taking shots at the end, all celebrating my sobriety. It was funny. So it wasn't hard because I didn't want to drink. What was hard and what was a shock to my system is in social situations, what I normally would do is drink, and not to really get drunk, but just to feel a little bit more at ease and to be able to let the conversation flow. So now I had to try and make conversation with drunk people, and they want to obviously stay up as long as possible. So everyone's trying to. So that was kind of the hardest thing for me, standing around for hours just chit-chatting and then like the shame that I felt at the time, which led to my depression in the first 2 months, was everyone else was making a success of themselves and had families and had businesses and were doing very well and making money. And I was moving in back with my parents at the age of 32 and just come out of rehab, no income. So that was kind of what led to my depression. And I really struggled, so I tried to do everything I could. I went to church, I made friends, I tried to stay fit and healthy. I tried to do everything that you would think would make you feel better, and I just wasn't feeling better. I was feeling very depressed. And so I went to the doctor to get some antidepressants. And so he told me it's going to take about 2 weeks for the antidepressants to work. But he's like, don't worry, I'll write another prescription for you just to take care of you in these 2 weeks. I knew what it was going to be, and he did tell me, but I just made as if like I was just going to accept it. It was Xanol. I don't think it was a very strong one, but he gave me 10 of them that he said, just take it when you're feeling anxious. And then, so when I got home, I took the first one, and then I was like, nah, I know what's going to happen. I'm going to take now a couple, then I'm going to take more tomorrow. So I just took all 10 of them that first night, and ended up like, yeah, I had a good night and went to sleep, but I felt really guilty. And then I decided, okay, I can't go down that path again. But what I'm trying to say is you do get a slip up, and it's not the end of the world. If you can, the next day, if you can dust yourself off and realize what is at stake and what you could lose by going down this path again. And I really have a secret weapon that I use to despise drugs and alcohol. Like I really have an ability to visualize myself feeling hungover, or feeling the guilt of taking drugs, or feeling the disappointment in myself, or being down that road again. So I really put myself in that situation. I start to feel nauseous if I think about drinking or taking drugs now, because it really especially because I'm quite fit now, and if I have to go do a workout later, the idea of waking up with a hangover is that's like the worst thing I can imagine. So. But there are struggles on the outside, struggles dealing with people don't always understand. I haven't had people trying to convince me to take drugs or drink at all. I've actually been quite fortunate in that people look out for me and they care about me, so they wouldn't do that. I did have to write off some friends though. Friends that even when I left here, I thought to myself, if I just keep my distance but keep a relationship with them, then I can still be friends with them. But I realized very quickly that they're very unreliable, and they really just focused on one thing. They didn't care about my sobriety at all. They didn't congratulate me on going through rehab. They were just focused on getting drunk or getting high, and it really was a relief for me to let them go. Deleted all their numbers, and I haven't spoken to them since. I've heard some stories about them, and it doesn't sound good. Stories like he's just sitting in his apartment, killing himself with drugs. This guy just been fired from his job. This guy's just been through a divorce, those kind of stories. I also realized when they don't listen to me, if I try and give them some advice and try and suggest that they go to rehab, and if they don't want to listen, it's pointless me being friends with them, because that's what our conversation would always be about. Eventually, I started feeling a bit better. I was still going to church. I was making some good friends through the CrossFit and through the church. Oftentimes they're combined. A lot of the people in the CrossFit are in the church, so I made quite a good community around myself. And it was quite a weird thing, because my whole life I've been going to braais, going to parties, inviting people to my house. And these friends of mine in Kimberley, I'm really fortunate in this regard that they'd invite everyone for a braai. I'd assume that there's going to be alcohol because they say bring your own drinks. And I'd get there and it's just cream sodas and Cokes and orange juice and like all people our age. So it was a really strange thing for me. I feel I'm really, really lucky in that regard. that I've got a lot of friends now that don't drink at all. If they do drink, maybe one beer over Christmas, and that would be all. They don't know drugs. Often they've never even heard of the drugs that I speak of. So the next few months after that, I really put a lot of effort into my religion. I wouldn't say that I've arrived, as Brett said also, but I think it's the trying, it's the pursuing, it's the knocking on the door, it's the seeking that's keeping me on the right path. At least I'm faced in the right direction. And I do still sometimes have bad moments or bad thoughts, not ones of relapse, but just of negativity, and I do sometimes go through periods of depression and feel like nothing's working. It's actually funny, there's a verse that helped me a lot here in Jericho. One specific night I couldn't sleep and I was really angry and things weren't going well. I think at that time I was about 3 months and I was trying to convince Ralph through superior logic that 3 months is enough, and Jericho, I'm not really an addict, and all the usual things. That says something along the lines of, we rejoice even in our troubled times, because in rejoicing in our troubled times we build patience. Through patience we build strength, and we build character, and through character we get hope. Recently I had a situation. I was kind of with a girl, and it was about 3 weeks to a month that she was training with me, and we were spending a lot of time together, and she would sit with me at the gym afterwards, and we went for coffee. And then one weekend she was engaged to a dude that I didn't even know about. So that was a bit of a shock. Anyway, so I went through a funny period, and I was even in the gym I couldn't focus. I wasn't thinking about anything. I'd go to church and just think about this girl. I wasn't listening to the message. Someone brought that verse up for me again, and that just snapped me out of it like it did the first time when I read that. Is to just rejoice in troubled times. Just that concept of you're going through troubled times and not having pity for yourself, but actually rejoicing because you can get stronger through that troubled time. So my effort in my religion and trying to read the Bible extra and trying to pray, I'm doing a little devotions thing for myself now just to try and keep on it. That's really helping a lot. The community that's around me is helping a lot. And to study something that I have to go to class, like an external structure that I have to be at certain times. And now working at the gym also, I have to be there at 5 o'clock in the morning. I have to be there then from 4 o'clock onwards. And then to go to class, having that external structure around me really helps me. The second half of the year, I tried to move over to UNISA because again, I got complacent and probably arrogant, thinking I don't need classes or lecturers, I can learn it myself. And studying maths is not the easiest thing to learn yourself when you haven't done maths since 2005. So that didn't work out. The UNISA thing didn't work out. I just can't schedule something for myself and stick to it. I think I've learned over the years through my habits of being an addict to not stick to my own goals and schedules. So I feel eventually I will get there, but at the moment I'm going back to university so that I can go to classes. And I feel like that I can fill up my day with a piano class here and a CrossFit class here and maths class here. And so just keeping a structure and keeping busy is really an important thing. Getting bored and not having anything to do is really a danger, because that's when your brain starts to give you funny ideas, starts planting seeds in there, and you start getting bored and you start contemplating things, you start getting depressed. So one of the things I really would recommend is trying to fill your day up with a lot of things, and especially external things where people can hold you accountable. Yeah, because if you do it yourself, it's easy to not hold yourself accountable. Just a couple of lessons. Obviously, we all develop old ways in ourselves, old ways of thinking, old ways of behavior, and they do creep up a lot. And it really is an effort. You have to focus and you have to be diligent in trying to develop new ways of thinking and new ways of acting. And getting someone that can hold you accountable is a good thing for that. And also becoming aware of what you're thinking about, how you're feeling. Don't hide from your feelings, and don't try and avoid certain thoughts and emotions and so on. Just allow them to come up, see what they are, and then take it from there. But if you try and avoid something, often what you resist persists. So that's one thing. Another thing I had to realize, it's kind of like reality check the whole time, not having my own place. And that was kind of my big fear. I meet a girl and I really like her and things are going well, and then eventually I'm gonna have to tell her I live with my parents, and then it's that would be the end of that, So the reality check of what I've been through, and I often have people telling me this. Often, like, I'll sit with the pastor there, or I'll sit with my co-worker, one of the other CrossFit coaches, and tell him that, listen, I'm going through a hard time for these various reasons, because I'm living at home and I'm not making money, I'm not self-sufficient. And getting reminded of what I've been through, and that I'm sober, and that I went to rehab, and that I'm kind of still sober. I mean, I don't give myself enough credit for it. I still don't. Even saying that, I feel like, well, it's just like I haven't achieved anything. But I mean, being sober is probably the best thing that has ever happened to me. And staying sober, I remember thinking when I was here, I was like, how am I ever going to have fun again without a beer? Or how am I going to go to a party? How am I going to get the courage to speak to girls, or something like that? And I realize now that without alcohol, it's so much easier, it's so much better. You remember everything, you can actually build good relationships. You can get to know people, you're not just rambling on about nonsense. When you're sober, you realize this stuff, that like it's not as much fun as what you think, and you have to deal with a lot of things afterwards. So it really is enjoyable being sober, and I've really enjoyed the process. I enjoy my life now more than I ever have. Obviously, there's still struggles, and it's not easy. I still struggle with depression and anxiety sometimes. But there's a few things. Getting good friends, letting go of the old friends, that really helps. Learning to listen. In my mind, I've got this idea that there's two, well, that's not only in my mind, but there's the idea of God's voice and the devil's voice. I didn't come up with that idea, but there are voices that then speak to you in various ways. The way they speak to me is usually through circumstances. I remember when I was trying to stop weed, I'd sometimes stop for a week or two, and I would start thinking about getting more weed. And always the weirdest things would happen, especially when I had tried to stop and started again. Like, out of nowhere, my phone wouldn't work, or my car wouldn't start, or like my bank card would get swallowed by the machine. But I was persistent then. I was like, I'm not good. Like, I knew that this was a sign that I shouldn't do it, but I knew that if I just pushed on, I would get my weed somehow. So that voice I really had to learn to listen to, and to acknowledge and to listen to. And there's been a few instances recently, actually, that I was about to do a bad thing, not with drugs, but there was a girl who had a boyfriend, and she wanted me to come visit. No one ever parks in our driveway at the house, like outside the gate. They either come in or they park on the side. But this time, as I was reversing out, the gate opened, and this guy had parked dead in the middle of the driveway. And immediately I knew, I was like, this is the voice of God telling me that I shouldn't go down this path. And to listen to those voices, it guides the way for you. Similarly, there's the voice of the devil. I've been planning to come and do this testimony, and this like from about Saturday, I think I was planning to come, like specifically this week. And a lot of things kept going wrong. It's as if there was something trying to keep me from doing this testimony. Now, instead of thinking that, or getting mistakenly thinking that was the voice of God doing the same tricks, I realized that it's the devil trying to do the same tricks, because this is something good that I'm trying to do, and hopefully can help someone through it. And there were a lot of things that were trying to hold me back from getting here. So to learn to discern between those two voices is a really important skill to learn. So I just want to end off by saying I really wish that you guys realize the opportunity that you've got here at Jericho. I mean, this place really saved my life, and I was open-minded to it. I submitted to the program, and submitted to God, and submitted to my own will being useless. I wasn't really able to get anything done through my own will. I really hope that you guys accept this opportunity, make the most of it, do absolutely everything you can to stay sober. It really is worth it. I'm not just saying that now. Life is actually a wonderful thing, and I hope that you guys realize that, and good luck in your journey.